Today's episode is brought to you thanks to the support of Jerry Mangona. During the day, he's a financial advisor with Edward Jones. It's people like Jerry Mangona who keep Daily Detroit on the air. If you'd like to join him, you can at patreon.com/dailydetroit. Hello and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties, the beautiful Tri-County region of Southeast Michigan. Today, we're talking about putting power in the hands of our younger adults. The Skillman Foundation, led by Angelique Power, is shaking things up when it comes to being the decision makers on giving grants. They also provided access to people who are 18, 19, 20, and from places like Detroit to the Mackinac Policy Conference, and some of those younger voices made some head-turning presentations. Two of those voices, and Angelique, you will hear in a moment. If you've got feedback, dailydetroit@gmail.com. I'm all ears, and let's get started. We are joined by Angelique Power, President and CEO of the Skillman Foundation. Welcome to Daily Detroit.
Thank you so much.
As well as Logan Newman, President's Youth Council, the CEO of 94 Feet Media. Pleasure to meet you. And then Mohammad Muntakim, also of President's Youth Council, co-director of Detroit's Muslim Youth Council. So good to see you.
Thank you for having us.
Of course, of course. So we're talking about all these things. Angelique, why don't we set the table and say, so what is this?
Yes. Well, first of all, Skillman is a private independent foundation. We focus on Detroit. We give away about $22 to $23 million a year focused on Detroit children and youth. What that means is that we back Detroit children and youth in their fight for equity and in the ability to be the designers of their own destiny. I started 9 months ago, and when I walked in, I had this incredible youth council that had just been formed. And so the youth council was coming together. The goal was to provide advice to the president. I met with them, a month before I actually started and realized, first of all, this group is brilliant and incredible and amazing. Second of all, they're very emblematic of Gen Z in terms of being creative and authentic and wanting to do more than just talk. And so pretty quickly, we went from having a council of advice to having grant makers. They've given away over $100,000. They decided how to give it, to whom. They decided a process for reporting, for decision making. And we just actually had a panel yesterday that set the Mackinac Policy Conference on fire. They're the youngest presenters in the history of the Mackinac Policy Conference.
That's awesome.
And they're directing all of our programming. They'll hire the next cohort, remain as alumni, and they're changing us at the Skillman Foundation for the better.
I think back to the time, and I don't want to sound old or whatever, but I think about the time when people just kind of dismiss millennials. And, and now we're the largest group in the workforce. And I think it's so good to embrace far earlier a generation of people who want to get things done and do things and give that and empower them, because it takes everyone to build a community.
Yes. And actually, we credit millennials for really beginning to shift the scales of power in the workplace. But then it was labeled entitlement. And folks don't want to work and they don't want to put in the effort and they don't want to go through the slog that other generations had to go through. What we see with Gen Z is that they're shaped by these once in history, once in a lifetime experiences and building on the path of millennials. So they have very little faith in the systems that are running currently. They have a huge imagination to try to rethink how things can work with justice at the center. They are the integrity generation. So companies that do an inclusive statement of pride, once a year, or makes racial equity statements that are toothless, they are not interested not only in believing them, but not interested in shopping at those entities, working at those entities, or investing in those entities.
I used to work in corporate communications, and I would call it the kabuki theater.
Yes.
Right? It's like, here's a statement, here's a press release.
Yes.
But what you want are companies and organizations that whatever they are, that they're authentic and that's what they actually do.
Yes.
That's what they invest in on a regular basis. And it needs to go beyond just what you get covered in the media for. It needs to be how you hire people, how you include people, how diversity works, what does your executive team look like? What kind of people are you hiring? Because it's all well and good to send a press release, but if the place doesn't reflect that, everyone, people know, and I think like Gen Z obviously knows, but us millennials too, we know, like we pick up on this thing.
Well, one cool thing about millennials and Gen Z is that they're also using investment as a tool of mobilization. And so an example of this was recently when GameStop was going to be taken over by a hedge fund. And I don't know if you heard about this. And suddenly on Reddit, all of these Gen Zers and millennials got together and they shorted the stock, which meant the hedge fund went bankrupt. And so you see like these rapid fire movements happening on TikTok, on Reddit, on social media, and they're mobilizing for social impact and for good. So it's a wake-up call, I think, to other generations. This is going to be the largest voting bloc. This generation is going to have tremendous economic power. And what they believe in is integrity and change, not just for themselves, but for the collective good. And thank goodness we need them.
Our discourse, whether politics, social things, it needs to have that kind of actual conversation and focus on getting things done and focus on making life better for people. Mohammad, I'm going to start with you only because the mic's in front of you first. Very practical reasons. First, before we get into this, tell me about the Detroit's Muslim Youth Council.
Yeah, so Detroit's Muslim Youth Council was founded, we're in our inaugural cohort this year. It was founded actually to continue the work of a previous campaign, Detroit Public Schools Off for Eid. Growing up in high school, when we were in Detroit, the Detroit Public Schools school calendar did not observe the Muslim holidays. So a group of students in this school system decided to advocate for that. And this was the past year, May's 3rd, 4th, and 5th, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this year, Detroit schools were off for the Eid al-Fitr holiday. So that started off as a campaign in the community led by young people in the city. And we wanted to continue that work, that effort of being in places, showcasing young Muslims and valuing Muslim values in spaces that are often not inclusive or represented. And we know Detroit has a growing Muslim population that's continuing to grow. So our efforts hopefully reflect that we're able to be in spaces like that to continue the work.
The thing about that is that it's so important to have that acknowledgement of, even if it's not your holiday,
Exactly.
the respect that other people in your community do it, right? It's about,
Exactly.
to me, it's about mutual respect. I am not Muslim, but I really value the contributions. And to me, why not celebrate it?
Yeah.
Why not put it out there? Or I think about when I see teams or I see organizations where they don't think about it, even if their organization has Muslims inside of it. You should just, because of that, honoring your own people.
Exactly.
Talk about that kind of thing.
Exactly.
What are some other things beyond that you're looking at doing?
So I think a cool project that we've been discussing with the Detroit's Muslim Youth Council, and especially this summer, kind of working towards building out a curriculum in Detroit public schools that reflects the Muslim community. So oftentimes, say for example, we'll go off for Christmas break or Easter break. There will be discussion. This is what Christmas, people know. This is the history. But those same discussions don't happen for other holidays, especially for the Muslim community and the Muslim students there. And to be honest with you, we've have kind of allies in our school. So like I went to schools, both were predominantly filled with minorities, big African-American population, a big Muslim population of Bangladeshis and Yemenis, and then also a big Hispanic population from southwest of Detroit. So they're allies in our work, but they don't know our kind of cultures and stuff. So that educational barrier that we have, we do it on the side, but needs to be ingrained in the system that people know. So when we share our cultures, we do it outside of school or when we're engaging in conversations aside, but they need to be implemented in classrooms so that we're aware of the different cultures that sit at the table, and we can acknowledge and work with each other to do great stuff.
As I've gotten older, one of the key things is that familiarity helps get rid of fear.
Yep.
And it's that fear that so many people operate under.
Exactly.
You know, I won't out them publicly because I don't want to, but I've had a number of listeners ask me because one of our contributors celebrates Ramadan.
Okay.
And quietly, hey, so what is that? So what is that, right? And people, these are educated people. They like, but it's so important to get the word out about like what these things are, because our region, not just the city, but our whole region is so much more diverse than it was, and it's only going to become more so. So why don't we switch over to Logan here, 94 Feet Media. So 94 Feet Media, I also understand, I have to say this, you have a podcast.
Yeah, so Crash and Board Podcast is a podcast that was started in 2018. Haven't recently been dropping any episodes because I've been focused on many more projects, but it's basically like the focal point of barbershop talk. Barbershop talk centered around sports. It's just given a free environment to where, I invite different athletes and different people in the sports world to talk about issues in and outside of the sports world that athletes deal with on a daily basis.
And I see a crossover here that you're talking not just about what's on the field, but also you said inside and outside.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah, it is important because me as an athlete myself, a lot of individuals look at us as just individuals that just dribble a ball. So the thing I do with 94 Feet Media is we work with inner city high school and middle school students, giving them career pathways other than just going to go play basketball. Or if they do want to play basketball, we provide them with opportunities, training, mentorship. So when they do pursue that career, they can pursue it in abundance and receive the most out of it.
Well, not to shoot anyone's dreams down, but the math on going pro is pretty low.
The math on going pro is pretty low because everyone only limits it to the NBA. So
Right.
Me, for example, I graduated from Cody High School. I didn't have any Division I offers, didn't have any Division II offers. Walked on to a basketball team, was a practice player, got cut. Ended up still practicing, still going, and finding the route playing basketball overseas in Spain. So right now I'm training in Spain. And I'm going to go over there for a training program. And after that, I will be signing with a team in Germany or Italy. So I have a couple options. But what I'm trying to do is open up the door so other individuals can go overseas and play basketball. Because it's not about just playing in the NBA or playing in America. And that's the beauty of it. There's thousands of hundreds of different teams and different leagues around the world that individuals can take advantage of to pursue that athletic career. They don't have any knowledge of it because there's not a lot of exposure.
Yeah, it's opening up people's horizons. I'm a big fan of soccer. We do a lot of Detroit City FC coverage. And, that team is people from everywhere. And soccer is a sport where people are from everywhere. But the other thing about Detroit City FC is they're not a Major League Soccer team, but they're still professional. And there's, teams, under that. There's all kinds of different opportunities that if you want to be into it, you need to think about things in a bigger way. And even though it's not an MLS team, it's also a very fun experience to go to. I mean, the travel, I think it's so crucial.
Right. And it's important that we educate our youth to not just limit themselves on just being in America playing a sport. It's very crucial that they do go out and travel the world and see the world for what it is. Because, if there's one thing I've learned over the last couple of years is travel the world and see things that you've seen on Google and that you see on scrolling on Instagram and that you've always dreamed on doing. Last year I went jet skiing, went on a yacht, just things like that we need to expose our youth to because, they want to live that life. They want to live in abundance and they want to have opportunities to do that. Someone just need to provide a platform for them so they can have access to that.
And see themselves doing it, right? I mean, that's another thing I think about. Michigan is a state where we have a lot of people who don't leave, a lot of people who stay here and they never leave to travel or things like that because we're a big state. Or there's also other challenges too, fiscal challenges, things like that. But travel helps change you. It influences you. You come back better. Every time I've traveled, it's better. And I'm so glad to hear that you're doing that, because I think about myself and, spending a number of years on the road. It means it's like you see something here and then you go, you know what? Someone else has dealt with that.
Right.
Or I saw how to fix that in this city. Or I talked to someone over here and this could influence what I'm doing here. Because we like to think a lot of times in Detroit, Metro Detroit, that our problems are a snowflake, that we've completely unique. And some things are. But a lot of things are not. People have figured some of these things out. And we need to tap the people who have traveled, who have been different places. And of course, people who are younger than the power structure, because that's another thing I think about. We were talking about millennials and Gen Z. If you think about the power structure, the older generations, they've been there a long time. And there really hasn't been as much turnover as there have been in other generations.
That's right. Well, first, I just want to echo that travel, I think, is one of the best forms of education. and you see new possibilities for yourself, and you also just learn different cultures, and you realize just sort of how small you are in this world and how big possibilities are. So I think that that's so important.
Now, I understand the two of you did presentations here at the Mackinac Policy Conference. Well received, something that, I'm glad to see these kinds of voices, not just younger, but diverse voices being a part of this thing. Really, what was the focus of your presentations for those who didn't watch? And I know that there's a bunch of other things that you have hands in, but let's start with the presentations.
So the focus was amplifying youth voices in spaces that youth aren't really allowed. Diverse youth voices, it is very important because it's important to have these youth voices because it affects us the most. I hate pulling this card, but we are going to be here longer than the people that was here before us. And it's just it's sad to say, but it's real. That it's real and it's raw.
But for somebody older, they should look at it as leaving as part of building legacy, so that people like you, and then your job when you become my age is to do the same thing.
Exactly. Like I'm real big on legacy myself. Like when I make decisions, I think, okay, how are my great grandkids going to be affected by this? And you need to. I'm a part of 7G. So 7G means thinking 7 generations behind. How can you lay a blueprint that the 7th generation after you can be affected by it? And if you're not thinking in that mindset, you're honestly just being selfish and just thinking of yourself. So that's why it's important for us, especially as diverse Black and Brown Gen Z individuals, to come into these spaces because we offer different perspectives. We have knowledge that a lot of other individuals from different age ranges don't have. So it's important to have this diversity because that's what a community is all about, to your point. If you want to create a well-diverse community and a strong community, there has to be representation from all different angles.
That generational approach is very different, especially than many publicly traded companies, that they're focused on the next quarter. And so even thinking about next year is hard for them. So I appreciate you bringing that perspective.
Most definitely.
Yeah, and I think for the listeners that were not able to view our session, or it's live on, it's uploaded on YouTube, so you can go check it out. But yeah, the conversation surrounding how can we talk about a shared prosperity and an equitable society, especially for youth across the state, but more specifically our hometown in Detroit, because as the youngest presenters in the history of this conference, I think to also reflect, we're from Detroit. We're brown and Black and brown folks from Detroit that have been able to have the opportunity to come to these spaces. And hopefully, as someone, this is our first time, but hopefully this is not the last time that young people and folks from Detroit come into these spaces. And us being here is an avenue for that, for more youth from Detroit to be here, present in the spaces, networking, presenting, and utilizing the resources that this conference brings to impact their own communities.
Yeah, because if you're going to think generationally, you need to think about when you open the door, not closing it right behind you, right?
Exactly.
Because there are a lot of people who will say, oh, I got the opportunity, then I'm going to shut that door right behind me.
Exactly.
Now, let's get into before we go, I want to make sure to get into this grant making piece, because Skillman is known for the grants that you do. There's so many different projects that you do. But this is a whole different twist to it.
It's pretty unique because you don't hear oftentimes that young people that are in high school, college, just after college, giving out big grants to institutions or so, or have been given the opportunity to make decisions and share their perspective, and then be institution and leaders of institutions being okay with that. So I think that's what's unique about Skillman. You were given the keys, you were given the opportunity to do so, reflect your mind, and so. For us, we gave away about $105,000 this past December. We have about 13 youth council members. So everyone came in with their own institutions in mind, located in the city of Detroit, that are focused on providing for young people in the city. And we kind of debated, kind of talked, shared out why we advocated for different institutions, different organizations, and nonprofits in the city. And then we were able to come to consensus. We used ranked choice voting to share like this. These are the institutions that are their stories, their efforts kind of relate. And then one important thing I think that is to take away is every institution or every organization's nonprofits that we brought up went away with something. We didn't leave anyone off the table. Everyone went home with something and funding. And the cool opportunity was the organizations that we advocated for, we were able to tell them ourselves, like, I brought you up to Skillman, and they're willing to give this amount of grant. use it how you feel. We didn't put restrictions on it. You need to do this. We didn't have a very big process of like, you need to report it like this. So that flexibility to use grant making to provide for your students, I think that's where it sits at, especially in the city.
It's interesting to me too, because this wasn't just an exercise. Like, this wasn't just a college class. You were actually putting the dollars to work.
Exactly.
And I want to mention to listeners, if you're not familiar with the concept of ranked choice voting, it's not just coming to a funding thing. It's probably coming to an election near you.
Hopefully soon.
At some point soon, because let me tell you, people that are my age and younger, ranked choice voting is a big deal with them. And if you are unfamiliar, go Google and get into it and get to understand it, because it's a much different way to make decisions.
I'm glad that we've actually started this movement of change, because to your point of ranked choice voting, our current me personally, I'm not too big on voting, because after the voting, it's like some people see it as a means to an end, and they don't understand that after voting it comes to work.
It's only the beginning. Here is a thing that I've learned that's been able to affect change over the years. So many times with local stuff, so few people show up. And so the people who show up make decisions. And so if you're showing up in the room, whatever age you are, wherever you're from, if you're showing up in the room, there's going to be times you're in rooms with nobody, which means you get to make the call and you're the voice. And I think that's a huge tip. It's one of the reasons why I think local stuff is so important. If we're going to change our country and make it more equitable, yes, we can look at the president and all that other stuff. But in reality, in our system of government, it's got to come from the bottom up in order for it to stick. Because what'll happen? A new president will be different there in 4 years. A new thing. If you do change where your community is built that way, where your council is built that way, where your mayor's built that way, and then your county commission is built that way, then it starts to build a solid base of equity and change that then lasts generationally.
The Youth Council met a lot of local politicians while they were here. A new member of the city council. If you look at the Detroit City Council, you see a very different budget that came forward this time around. Mm-hmm. And while the mayor stayed the same, the city council has changed. There are 4 seats open on the school board that are coming up for election. That's a really big election. So hyper-local politics are actually where a lot of decisions are made. And yet, at the same time, you have some folks, like you have people like me who's been voting since they were 18. I show up to vote for anything. I love it. I love the sticker, but there's so many who feel like there is no connection between what you vote for and what changes in your community. And so I think we have a lot of work to do in between now and the midterms, which are extremely important for anything to get done. We have a lot of work to do to draw that line so that young people can actually see why their vote matters. And local elections is where you really get to see it happen. So when you say you don't really believe in voting, I take that as the best challenge to say what can I do? What are the conversations you and I are going to have?
It's not like I don't believe in voting totally. I just don't believe in individuals voting and that's it. And that's just been the main narrative of voting. Personally, I do vote. Yes, I do. But when I vote, I make sure that I talk to the people I vote for. I converse with them. I do the research. I actually do the work. And that's what's missing in our communities and in our neighborhoods. People are just going to go vote just because they've been swindled. No, you actually have to go do the work, because that one vote really does matter. So I feel like if I'm going to go give you my vote, here's my agenda. Can you cater to my agenda? If you can't cater to my agenda that affects my community in a positive way, I'm sorry, you cannot get my vote.
Here's my problem, though. These politicians and candidates will make promises during the campaign season. But after the election season's over, these promises are nowhere to be seen. So that's my problem. We vote on an agenda that's presented to us, makes sense, a lot of valid. And then they get into office and then there's no result. And you say, oh, we vote them out. But then they're just kind of compromising their values and compromising different things and building relations to stay in office for long term. I think that changes with our generation.
The greatest enemy of democracy is apathy. right? And I think that's what we're fighting right now. You know, you'll see the 24-hour news stations, and I get heat for this, but I don't really watch them because I don't really think they're news. I think they're infotainment, and I'm a journalist, and I don't watch them. And that's a bold announcement, but it's true. And the reason being is that we're getting into these these things, these cycles. You just keep hearing the same stuff, and it's all the partisan talking points. And it isn't that like accountability, because you know what? If on those stations, if your guy still does something wrong or didn't agree with, they just cover up for it and go on to the next thing. And I think we have to change our discourse to something that is more direct and more pointed and intentional.
Yeah, because what it does, it makes the viewer a little numb. It makes the viewer numb because it's the constant information just being recycled over and over again. So the viewer is like, I'm real big on media. Like I have my own media company, and my goal is to change the narrative of media. And what media has been known to do was make the viewer numb to real things that they should be concerned about.
Because their number one goal is to keep you tuned in so
Right.
that they can sell you more ads.
You know, I say this a lot, but you have to follow where the money comes from. And where the money comes from is where the agenda comes from. And when you look at that agenda, you have to make an assessment. Okay, does this agenda correlate with my values as a person and my values as a community? And if it doesn't, it's real important that you disconnect from that media, because it will taint you. It will give you a lot of the false narrative that's have been created about just the city of Detroit have been created by highly funded news platforms that aren't really local, but they are local.
You know, to me, it's like, have you ever been to a blog club meeting? And not just like as a reporter, but like, what is going on in your space?
Have you ever been to a community event? Have you ever knocked door to door? Things like that.
Have you ever been yelled at a story you did over your own fence? I have.
Exactly. I think we need to get back to a grassroots level to where we're putting the people first and worrying about the money later.
Well, Angelique, Logan, Mohammad, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all three of you. I'm sure we could go on and go on and go on. And I hope that we get the chance to talk again soon.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
And we are done for today. We'll be back tomorrow with more conversations that push Metro Detroit forward. I'm Jer Stays. Thanks so much for listening to Your Daily Detroit. Remember that you are somebody, and I'll see you around town.